I've longed for this place for so long. Now I lay me down and be long. And I breathe in the air fresh from the blessed Midwest. I am held by the forest where I go for rest, and washed by the waters of Lake Michigan. And wherever I go, I will return again to my home, the blessed Midwest.
Hart Beet Farm is a diversified vegetable farm primarily. So we grow over 70 varieties of vegetables and 50 varieties of herbs. But we also do forest farming, maple syrup production. We have pastured poultry for eggs. So we do a lot of different things on the farm.
Fresh from the blessed Midwest, I am held by the forest where I go for rest, and washed by the waters of Lake Michigan. And wherever I go, I will return again to my home, the blessed Midwest.
So Hart Beet Farm has 4 owners: myself, Nikki Morgan, my wife, Katie Hosteller, and my 2 parents, Beth Morgan and Daryl Morgan.
Almost ran over the photographer.
My mom, Beth, and I do the primary work in the field of growing the vegetables. Dad is the mechanic, so he does a lot of the repair work and also runs our wash and pack shed. Katie works off farm at the moment, but does work quite a bit filling in the field when she's not at her day job. We also have 2 employees that help out part-time during the week, doing a little bit of field work and harvesting for us.
The blessed Midwest.
I had it all figured out, knew which road I would go down, thought I could do it all on my own, but then you came around. When fate has its way and things fall into place, all the plans you made don't make sense anymore. Honey, I am sure that love was a good detour.
All of the owners of Hart Beet Farm came to farming in a bit of a roundabout way. I never intended to be a farmer. I went to school to study anthropology. My goal was to get a degree in archaeology and do that. I finished my undergrad in 2008 when the economy collapsed, and I thought, let's put, a master's or a doctorate on hold. Let's just wait a little bit and see what happens. But part of my study was really looking at the way civilizations existed and declined, or collapsed even. And a lot of it really focused on resources and resource mismanagement and unequal distribution of those resources. And so, as an aside from my studies, I thought it would be really beneficial for me to understand where our food comes from now and get a better understanding of the resources that we have and we need and where they're coming from and how we get them. So I decided to do work on a farm for a season and get some experience with that, and I absolutely fell in love with it. The economy wasn't necessarily getting any better at that point, and so I just kind of continued on that trajectory. When I met my wife, Katie, she had an interest in farming as well, you know, so that sort of fit together. You know, my folks had always appreciated being stewards of the land, and, you know, we were looking for property to start a farm, and at the time we were in Minnesota, the market there is incredibly saturated with farmers, and buying land was going to be difficult. So we found a really great relationship in being able to work with my parents, who owned this beautiful property that was not a farm until we started farming it. We have no infrastructure. We had no, you know, field plans. We had no irrigation plan. So all of that was built from the ground up here with the four of us in collaboration. And, you know, it's just been growing ever since.
For you.
Cannot trust it to come again. To wait for you to find it and fill the paper with the message that it wants to send.
What do you got?
I got 8, and like 1 or 2 of them are pretty good size.
Okay, well,
1 or 2 of them are kind of tiny.
I'd say we'll just go through the whole bed, and anything that looks like it needs to be picked, we'll pick. And if you could be a fly on the wall on our farm and see us, I'm afraid we'd look a little ridiculous. We'd be really sweaty. There's a lot of running back and forth. There's a lot of hard labor.
Farm farts.
I'll put this broccoli next to your face.
My face?
Yeah. Unless, like, there's not enough for them to do and someone needs to come back.
There's a lot for bagging.
Then leave, yeah. Then both of them
Okay.
can stay back for a little bit.
Okay, that would be probably fine. You'll enjoy it.
The vibe on the farm is generally always triage. You know, there's always a much longer list of things to get done than what you're going to accomplish in a day, which is why I always think it's important for farmers to have some pretty serious resilience. Butterhead with it. What do you guys think? Just like two types of butterhead, or better like butterhead and something else? From day to day, you know, I don't know what we'll be doing throughout the entire day. I get up with one idea and we start with that, and then we pivot to something else, and then to something else, and then trying to kind of triage anything that's gotten a little too crazy, you know? If you haven't pruned or trellised your tomatoes, then sometimes that moves itself up to the top of the list before some of the other planting. Every farmer will always tell you they're behind, because they are, because they make a list that's too big to accomplish. So, you know, we kind of go from one task to the next until the day is done. And then we wake up the next day and do the same thing all over again. There's no season in which we are not doing work. A farm requires work 12 months out of the year, even a vegetable farm when you don't have vegetables growing in the winter. We start our seeds, the first seeds in the greenhouse at the end of January, but before that we are producing maple syrup. Before that we are making the field plans, and before that we're still cleaning up from the season before. So, one season kind of rolls into the next, and we shift our focus, from planting in the spring to harvesting and weeding in the summer to harvesting and processing in the fall to clean up to planting the next season to starting the next season, and then it all flows one into the next. We are very big on crop rotation, and I have a pretty intense spreadsheet. It gets a little crazy moving pieces around, but once things kind of fall into place, then we can set the plan for the year. Then we can set our planting dates. We grow a lot of different vegetables, and they all have different requirements, different times they need to be planted, different ways to be planted, some of which need to be seeded in the greenhouse first. So we create that whole plan in the winter time and put all the moving parts together. So the greenhouse, starting in the middle of February until now, is just chock full of plants. If we can seed something and transplant it, we will. We find that our plants are just healthier that way. We have better germination in a controlled setting in the greenhouse. So that's on a schedule. We have a very nice spreadsheet for that too. So a lot of our crops, we grow green beans, for instance. We're not going to seed those in the greenhouse, but in the field, they are planted on succession. We don't want all of our green beans at once. No one's back wants all the green beans at once. So those are scheduled maybe 2 or 3 weeks apart. Something we do that not everyone does is we seed beets in the greenhouse and then transplant those. And those, we try to keep beets throughout the season. When we first started farming, our name is Hart Beet Farm, and we were terrible at growing beets, which is really not acceptable without just changing the name of the farm. We really liked our name. So we got much better at growing beets. And so now we do seed them in the greenhouse and transplant them. And those we are on a succession too. So every few weeks we'll seed a new round of beets, and we always try to have different varieties. So the first succession might be red beets, the second will be gold, the next will be Eolia. And just to, keep it interesting and to get people to try something different besides the one thing that they're used to seeing in the grocery store. During the bulk of the season, going into the summer and into the fall, we focus a lot on harvesting. So there are certain crops like cucumbers and okra and tomatoes that have to be harvested 3 days a week. And then, we're harvesting for our CSA program, we're harvesting for farmers market. So we ultimately get Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday to get any field work done. So during those months, it's a lot of cleaning up, it's a lot of weeding. Sometimes that's hand weeding, sometimes that's hoeing, sometimes it's pruning tomatoes or, trying to better understand disease, things that are happening in the field that we need to address. There's a bunch of mushrooms growing in this bed.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's like those inky caps.
White ones?
No, it's like the inkies, and so I'm hoping that most of that'll wash off, but
Are they up in the heads?
No, it's just like they're on bottom leaves. You see where it's all black? Yeah, that's just from the mushrooms. Our soil health is really important. We practice no-till on the farm, so that helps us in the spring. We don't need to get a tractor necessarily into the field to get started. And depending on the crop, we may or may not add compost to our soil for the moment, but since we stopped tilling the soil every year, we see our soil health get better, and we see less and less requirements on us to interact with that soil in a way that provides, fertility and nutrients, and more of the soil and the living organisms within it providing that for us. But if we do notice some issues or we need some additional fertility, we will use a fish hydrolysate, which I really love. It smells like an aquarium, but it's a fishery outside of Chicago, and they utilize the invasive carp, Asian carp from the river. So they're actually cleaning up the river of invasive species and creating a fertilizer for farmers at the same time. So we think that's pretty cool, and we like to support that. But otherwise, we generally don't need to do anything during the season for our crops. They pretty much grow themselves, if all things are in place. Our weed management is completely hands-on. So we very rarely use a tractor in the field. So sometimes that means we're hand weeding on our hands and knees. Now, between our beds and our walking paths, we do get some pretty good use out of a weed eater. So I spend some pretty solid days during the summer just weed eating between the beds, but that actually keeps, so you're actually having plant roots in the soil in those walking paths instead of bare soil, which is prone to runoff. And so that allows for more water infiltration into the soil as well. So, and then when you're cutting those plants off, even if it's just grass, then you're providing more biological material to break down and build up your soil. When it comes to pest management, rather than just having sort of blanket methods for managing pests, we want to know exactly what that pest is. And then for us, one of our biggest pest management techniques is the use of beneficial bugs. So, if we have an aphid problem on our tomatoes, we know that green lacewings are voracious feeders of aphids. And so we can simply introduce those species into the area where we have an aphid problem, and they will just devour that pest. No spray needed, right? And you're not killing other biologicals that you actually would like to have around. So we want to create this living, vital system that is, interwoven, that we're just simply assisting, The more hands-off we can be, the better. That's our goal. One of our biggest pests on the farm is actually deer, and they like to come in, walk down your lettuce bed, and eat one bite out of every head of lettuce. So one of the easiest things we can do is a simple netting over some of our lettuce. It's really basic, it just helps provide simple protection, and they don't eat it. So another thing we use, we're actually just trying it out this year, is a product called Protect Net. So it's a finer mesh, and that can help protect some of our crops from larger moths and caterpillars and thrips and things like that. And so one of the things we struggle with the most is our all of our brassicas really, but our kale in particular, with cabbage moths and the cabbage worms. And so we want to be able to grow kale throughout the season, but we also don't want to spray pesticides on our crops. And so that's something that allows us to grow that crop without hand-picking caterpillars, basically, and giving up. But at some point, we kind of feel like when it comes to pests, it's our responsibility to kind of help put things back into balance. There are things that we work harder for, like our tomatoes, that we really want to have all season. But if we know it's a losing battle, like with squash bugs, then we give in eventually and we move on to the next thing. So our fields are completely watered with drip irrigation, and we have one well on the farm. It's a lower pressure system, so we have above ground lines that run across the property and throughout our fields. It's a little bit of an elaborate system, but it works for us. And the benefit is that using drip line actually helps keep diseases down by not getting the leaves of the plants wet when you're watering. So. So we've recently introduced pastured poultry to our farm. So we have a small flock of just 26 egg layers. And they are a vital part of the crop rotation. So we see them as another box on the spreadsheet next to tomatoes, you know, in the rotation is chickens. There are rules about when they can be in the field and not, but generally the winter time is a great time to get the chickens on the fields for fertilization. And then when we're growing vegetables, we can allow the chickens to forage all around the outskirts of the field after some of our perennials have been harvested to clean up any bugs, which, you know, helps manage any pest problems we might have, adds fertility to those perennial crops. And so they are a vital part of our farm and our crop rotation. We've been, for the past few years, kind of expanding, sort of growing on more land, and there's really a limited number of us. And so for us, that's, you know, we're trying to grow within our limits, and now we've kind of hit those limits and gone a little bit beyond. But the long-term plan is to also add a commercial kitchen to our farm. My wife Katie is a chef, and we really want to be able to, you know, capitalize on her skills, and also the laws around cottage food laws in Missouri are really limited on what we can do to preserve our harvest. So if we have extra tomatoes and cucumbers, that's really great, but we're not allowed to make pickles and salsas. We can make jams and breads, but that's about it. And so what we want is to be able to expand on that so that we have less waste on the farm, and that we can also be a place for other farmers to have less waste, so that we can purchase from them to make products out of our kitchen. Because we are a certified naturally grown farm, which essentially has the same standards as the organic program, and we believe in not using synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, or herbicides, we also want to choose seeds from growers that were growing the same way. And then when we're picking varieties, you know, we focus on a few things. The most important is flavor. We want our produce to taste good. We also want it to be interesting, even if that's just visually interesting. We want people to see food in a different way. And, you know, we want to be able to make sure it gets to them, but for us, we harvest the produce the day before they receive it. So, you know, there's not a long truck ride across the country that it has to make, so it doesn't have to be a rock hard tomato. It just has to not split, you know, within the few hours it takes from getting it to the farm, you know, into someone's kitchen. So we're really just trying to select things for that flavor, for variability, for the interest of getting people to think more about their food. Hart Beet Farm, we sell primarily to consumers through our CSA, our Community Supported Agriculture Program. And then we also sell locally at the Lake St. Louis Farmers Market. We do a little bit of wholesale to restaurants or small grocers in the St. Louis area too, but primarily to end consumers. So our CSA program is strictly based on the produce from our farm, as well as some wild foraged produce as well. And our season runs for 24 weeks, and our members get a box of vegetables every week for 24 weeks, starting at the end of May, going through the beginning of November. And currently we have about 57 members, and we make up about 31 boxes of vegetables a week. Spring CSA boxes are heavy on greens, so we definitely have head lettuces, we have baby chard, spinach, the most beautiful radishes we have ever grown, hands down, scallions, possibly garlic scapes if they're ready. We think everyone should have a connection to their food, and that might be growing in your backyard, it might be getting your hands in the soil. And if you don't have the ability to grow at all, just getting to know your local farmers, getting to know them as individual human beings, to know what they're growing, how they're growing, the work that goes into the food you're eating is so important. We have, in some ways, created a global civilization. Because we are so interconnected around the globe, we rely so much on other countries to meet our needs, and they rely on us. And so those dynamics just become so much larger. I think the pandemic really helped to illuminate that and to see where things like our food system was incredibly broken. It was set up to have zero resiliency. One small glitch in the system and the whole system falls apart. Whereas, your small local farmers were able to adapt. We could quickly figure out how to set up a website, do pre-orders, do deliveries that we weren't doing in the past, because we had the ability to be flexible and to pull things out of our toolkit that we weren't previously using. I think it would be wise, me as the advisor to the world, it would be wise for us to take a really big look at what happened when some of those really simple systems broke down, why they don't work, and why, your smaller scale local systems did. And take note from that, because I think we are in such an interconnected world today that it still makes sense for us to rely on these large global sort of trade networks. But we need to figure out how to be more resilient. We do what we do because we believe it's good and necessary. People need to eat, everyone needs to eat, and everyone should have access to healthy, nutrient-dense food. And we believe that we need more people growing our food in a sustainable way, without pesticides and herbicides, without, additions, just good, clean, healthy food. And so we feel like we want to be stewards of the land and provide for others in doing so.
Travel far, now retreating. I've longed for this place for so long. Now I lay me down and be long. And I breathe in the air fresh from the blessed Midwest. I am held by the forest where I go for rest, and washed by the waters of Lake Michigan. And wherever I go, I will return again to my home, the blessed Midwest. I am torn, I am bleeding. See many souls, many holy. Remember their faces and hope. Oh, till we meet again. Oh, and I breathe in the air fresh from the blessed Midwest. I am held by the forest where I go for rest, and washed by the waters of Lake Michigan. And wherever I go, I will return again to my home, the blessed Midwest, the blessed Midwest.